Welcome to another Pirkei Avot text discussion. We are now on to chapter 1, text number 6. And this starts off with a very similar formulation as we saw a couple of texts ago. Joshua, son of Pirkei and Nittai, the Arbalite, received from them. Just as we saw with a couple of texts ago, this pair receiving from them. It's something that happens 5 times throughout the entirety of this first chapter of Pirkei Avot, and actually gets mentioned again in the second chapter. But it really is a function. It really is something that is rather unique to this first chapter of these pairs receiving from another pair. It just keeps going, and just as we saw 2 texts ago, we hear a saying from one of these, not rabbis, but one of these proto-rabbis. So we have here Yehoshua ben Pirkei, Joshua son of Pirkei, used to say, again this, or actually he says, Joshua ben Pirkei says, make a teacher for yourself, acquire for yourself a friend, and judge everybody on the side of merit. So quickly breaking these things down, I mentioned before, this tripart statement saying 3 separate things is really common stylistically here, and Joshua son of Pirkei very much sticks to this style. Now the first thing of make for yourself a rabbi, it sounds like you really have to, if you want a rabbi, if you want a teacher, that it's not necessarily that teachers are going to come to you and trying to grab you. You as a student, as a potential student, really have to make the outreach and make the effort in saying you're going to, not necessarily like you're going to be my rabbi, but doing the process of doing the outreach really to this potential teacher. The second of these is acquire a friend for yourself. That there's this, it's interesting, the language of acquisition, right? Acquiring a friend, which is really fascinating when thinking about the juxtaposition with the verb language of make for yourself a rabbi. Here it's acquire, that it's not something you can just make. It can't just happen, because the acquiring a friend really sounds more of a process, and not just a process, but also something that there's a relationship, there's a little bit more of a back and forth rather than a sort of a, because it's really making a difference, a distinction between the relationship one has with the teacher versus the relationship one would have with friends. The final one is really interesting. Judge everybody to the side of merit. Now this uses this visual of like a scale, right? How would scales used to work? You'd have 2 kafs, you'd have 2 like little cups, and you'd put something here and see how it measures and weighs out. I think we're all familiar with the scales of justice model, and that's exactly what this visual is working off of, that scales of justice, right? So you have basically one side that is for the merit and one side that is, let's just say, the opposite of merit, okay? It's really finding fault with the other person. We could say the side of guilt versus the side of merit. So we really want to judge everybody on the merit side. This is ostensibly what we want to have happen, or really how we should view people. I find really fascinating the verb here. All 3 of these verbs are really deeply interesting, right? Make for yourself a rabbi, acquire for yourself a friend. These are not typical ones. And then here we see judge, which typically judging, at least in rabbinic texts, is really more along the lines of how does one adjudicate, how does one process really court cases, right? We're talking about legal matters here. But here, this is just as we saw in the first 2 of these statements. This is also very much in the social realm. This is dealing with people. So when you see someone or hear something about someone, maybe a friend, maybe a neighbor, what he's advising is don't just jump to conclusions and think, oh, they did something wrong. The opposite is true. You might, I think the natural thing is to want to jump to conclusions and assume that neighbor or friend or family member or colleague, whomever it is, they did something wrong. that they were in the wrong. They did something. They seem like they're guilty. But he's saying it's what he really is advising is for you to consider them in an innocent fashion, right? In a meritorious fashion. The Talmud actually takes a few different cases. It's actually in Babylonian Talmud Shabbat, where it takes a few different instances, and it seems like rabbis did something, let's just say, not good, right? But it turns out their students or whomever it was involved, or in one case I think it was a merchant, but they gave them the benefit of the doubt, and it turns out that was what actually happened. It doesn't always happen that way, of course, but when we give someone the benefit of the doubt, it can definitely lead to better relations with other people. So we all judge, right? We all judge other people. If we're going to judge other people, might as well give it to the side of benefit. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for tomorrow's.